This webinar is organized within the Interreg project South Baltic Food Innovation. And this international project is about developing food innovation capacity in small and medium-sized enterprises, so-called SMEs, in the South Baltic region. So today, we will meet researchers that will tell us exciting things about the research project, as well as different SMEs and one development center that will tell us their story. We have Cornelia Witthöft that will talk about healthy, delightful pulses, and Åsa Grimberg that will tell us something about the faba bean project at SLU. Per Modig at Fagraslätt will talk about organic cultivation of pulses on his farm. Pia Kvarnström at Swedish Temptations will talk about her product Berta. And Anneli Idman will tell us about her very green food truck. Just wait and see, and you will see how green it is. Anna Henning Moberg from Torsåker X Foundation, that works as a project developer, will tell us about her involvement in the development of legumes. And finally, Kalmar Öland Trädgårdsprodukter will tell us about their production of beans and peas and what kind of products all these pulses are developed into. This webinar is organized by the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, SLU, which is a partner in this South Baltic Food Innovation Project. My name is Helena Persson-Homan, and I work as a researcher at SLU, and I will act as a kind of moderator today. And I also have my colleagues Gun Hagström, Madeleine Ugla, and Jenny Arné, and together we will guide you through this webinar. So, before we start, some practical things. Firstly, I want you to be aware of the fact that this webinar is recorded, and the resulting video will be uploaded to the webpage of the project. And secondly, all participants that are not giving a talk will be muted, and after each talk there will be 5 minutes for questions. So if you want to ask something, just raise the hand symbol in Zoom and we will let you in, or ask in the chat. Okay? So let's start then. Once again, welcome, and I hope we will share some interesting and pleasant hours. So let's start with Cornelia Witthöft, professor at the Department of Chemistry and Biomedical Sciences at Linnaeus University.
My name is Cornelia Witthöft and I'm professor in food science at LNU. My research is on the quality of food, and we develop new healthy foods, and we are interested in food and health associations. For that reason, we extract and analyze nutrients and bioactive compounds in, for instance, food or clinical material. And here you see where we extract the clinical samples. And here we have some equipment which we often use for extraction of food samples and raw material. For analysis of bioactive compounds and nutrients, for instance, folate or polyphenols, we use either the HPLC or the LC-MS. Here in the food science teaching lab, we have, for instance, the mill or incubators or freezers, fridges, cooking equipment, which is used for producing food to be consumed. And here we also have the possibility to carry out sensory trials.
Good morning. I hope everybody hears me, and I hope everybody can see my screen. In my talk, I want to give, after a short introduction, information about nutrients and bioactive compounds affecting health, which are in pulses, other food quality characteristics of pulses, and give some few examples on research. Our dietary habits are monitored using a survey technique, Riksmaten, regularly by the Swedish National Food Administration. And it shows that we in our diet have too little fruit, vegetables and fish, or that we also lack enough intake of some nutrients like fiber, iron, D vitamin and folate. And in contrast, we eat too much saturated fat and, for instance, added sugar. If we look into the intake of vegetables, we see that in contrast to the 500 gram as recommended per day, the intake is about 170, 180 gram per day, and the legumes are only 7%, which would come up to 12 gram per day. So very low. When I talk about pulses in my talk, I mean the dried mature legume grains, and I'm now mainly focusing on these grains. I'm not so much focusing on vegetable legumes and not at all on livestock forage or oilseeds. Legumes and pulses are linked to several health benefits, and this is due to their content of bioactive compounds and nutrients. Fiber, polyphenols, which also lead to a low GI, are positively linked to glycemic control, which is of benefit with respect to type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome. The content of potassium and magnesium is linked to minimized risk for hypertension. We have positive effect of cardiovascular diseases, and for this, strong scientific evidence is available. However, it's also promising evidence, but still inconsistent or insufficient data with respect to positive benefits from with respect to cancer, weight management, and gut health. The pulses contain many nutrients, which are the nutrients or risk nutrients, which we just discussed with respect to the Swedish diet. And here you see a comparison of cooked meat or a cooked portion of different domestic legume grains. And please consider that the serving size is different, which is following the recommendations of the Swedish National Food Administration. The energy content of these is quite similar, and with the protein content, the pulses are almost catching up in comparison to meat products. But we have a much more positive situation with respect to a low fat content and also very healthy fatty acids, a high content of dietary fiber, which is one of the risk nutrients in our diet, and also a very high content of folate, another vitamin of which we have a deficiency of. But the pulses are also discussed with respect to some anti-nutritional compounds. And these compounds interfere, for instance, like lectins and phytate with the absorption and digestion of both macro and micronutrients in our food. And also other compounds like glycosides can, for instance, lead to flatulence. However, recent research has shown that small amounts of these compounds can even have a positive effect, for instance, with a postprandial improved blood glucose response or also with improved blood cholesterol levels. Because pulses are a traditional food, there's no tolerable daily intake or accurate reference dose defined, but we know that after cooking, the content of these compounds is reduced so that we can expect positive effects. So the food processing has an impact on how much of these anti-nutritive compounds or potential positive compounds or bioactive compounds are left in the pulse food. And the best reduction we have after hydrothermal processing. So that is cooking, and it is recommended to have a long soaking period of 12 to 14 hours. This leads to increased digestibility of starch and proteins and the highest decrease of anti-nutritional compounds, abbreviated ANF in this slide. One processing method I can also already mention, which leads to only a medium decrease of anti-nutritional compounds, but an improved digestibility of other macronutrients and micronutrients, and even a de novo synthesis of vitamins, is germination. So we know that the pulses have a positive health effect and have a potential. So it is important to test their suitability as functional ingredients. And we have produced some pulse flowers from domestic pulses, yellow and gray pea, and faba bean and white bean, and have prepared these pulse flowers with different preparation methods by soaking and boiling, germination, or roasting. These pulse flowers we have then compared to ordinary wheat flour, and we have both characterized nutrients and also the functional properties. With respect to nutrients, we've seen that the pulse flowers have an increased content of folate, which is especially high after germination. We have also an increased content of raw starch, however, the highest of resistant starch. However, the highest amount of resistant starch is in the raw white bean. And also the content of total dietary fiber is high, and the beans have usually a higher content than peas. And you see that the nutrients are several-fold higher as in comparison to normal wheat flour. If we look at the functional properties of these pulse flowers, we've seen that they all have a high water absorption capacity. That makes them very suitable for producing sausages, custards, and butter. However, their emulsion and foaming properties are not as high, which makes them not so suitable for cakes and mayonnaise. And as sole thickening or gelling agents, they are not suitable. We also looked at the volatile compounds in these pulse flowers, as the beany taste is something which not all consumers appreciate. And we have here data from domestic yellow and gray pea, and you see data with regard to raw and boiled products, or flowers made from raw and boiled peas and yellow and gray peas. We have identified 43 volatile compounds and also several specific markers for the beany flour. And after boiling, we have seen that the amount of alcohols decreased and the amount of aldehydes increased, which you can see by the blue and other colors. And you see that the aldehydes are the compounds which we have in the most amount in our flours. Boiling leads to a markant decrease of markers for beany flour. So we've seen they are promising raw material, And they have another food quality or attribute, and that is, of course, the environmental sustainability. We have in a study assumed a scenario where we have, based on the data of the national survey Riksmaten, calculated the effects of reducing intake of meat by 50% and replacing this with the same amount of cooked domestic pulses. What we saw was that we have a climate impact reduced by 20% and that we have also less requirement of land by 23%. But one could wonder how this affects the intake of nutrients, and this is what you see on this slide. We compared for our scenario diet the effect on nutrient intake as compared to the recommendations of the National Food Administration. And you see in the black boxes or the black line, which corresponds to the recommended amounts of the nutrients. And you see with the staples, first the current Swedish diet and always the second staple, the scenario diet. And we see in green the effects from the grain legumes or pulses, and in red the effect from meat, and gray are the other foods. And you can see an improvement of the intake of fiber and also of folate thanks to the pulses. And this is data for the average population. However, one has to keep in mind for specific population groups like young women in childbearing age, the current diet and the future diet or scenario diet would not be sufficient regarding intake of folate and iron. So pulses are promising novel foods, and we have, by a very simple change of processing technique, developed two promising new foods which are richer in nutrient content. We've seen that germination can increase folate content, the vitamin folate, by de novo synthesis 1 to 3-fold. And by just introducing a germination step into a normal process, or by incorporating germinated pulse flour into the producing of cookies, we have managed to produce a bean conserve, which is 50% higher in folate than the traditional food, and cookies which are up to 6 times higher in their folate content than traditional cookies. And in a last trial, and this is now my last slide, we have tested these foods and their impact on folate status or folate on health. We have given in an intervention study these new foods to women in childbearing age and have compared the effects to a group of women who received twice the dose of supplemental folic acid and compared this to a control group not receiving any folate. And you see to the right the effects on the plasma folate and erythrocyte folate, which are the status parameters. And you can see that compared to start of the study, in both groups, the supplemental folic acid group and the food group, the status parameters have improved significantly. So this proves that pulse foods both can have a positive effect on the vitamin folate status, as well as they have other beneficial health effects. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer to questions.
Thank you very much, Cornelia, for an interesting talk. So now I invite you for questions. If you have any questions for Cornelia, so please. Åsa, yes, I can see your hand.
Thank you, Cornelia, for a nice presentation. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good. So I was curious about these, you call them volatile compounds. Is this known that, so these, the ones that you showed, are these the ones that sometimes is called the beanie taste compounds? Is it well known, these compounds?
Yeah and no. There are some studies, not too many, and we have looked at the whole pattern. What you saw in my staples is the whole pattern. And of these compounds, 3 to 5 compounds are defined as the beanie flavor compounds. I have listed them on my slide, and we have also the publication where I have shown the link to, which is open access. So they are specific compounds which have been identified by other groups in other pulses, and we have now found them also in the Swedish pulses.
Okay, thanks.
Any more questions for Cornelia? I have a question about soybean compared to other beans, because we have heard that and read that soybean is the best bean on earth, and it's a really nice content of proteins and good quality. So is there a good alternative to soybeans, or going to combine different kinds of beans to be able to reach the soybean?
I know what you want to come to. Yes, it is true that the soybean protein has a high bioavailability or availability or digestibility and a very high quality. And in that respect, it is superior to other the domestic pulses or other pulses. But we do not really have problems with protein intake and consumption in the Swedish diet. That is visible by Riksmaten. And if you nicely and smartly combine pulses with cereal food, you improve the quality of protein. So you get a more favorable amino acid composition. So an improvement would be by simply mixing cereal food and pulse food. And you can either do that by having a meal, including both types of protein, or by developing a food which contains both.
Thank you. Okay.
There is a question in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, can you please read it, Gun? Chat, because the question.
I don't know if Cornelia can see it. I just saw
what was the effect of germination of the pulses you studied on the sensory product of properties of the product? Yes, that is a good question. And I have to admit that some germination might lead to not always a good taste. And the chickpea germination actually led to a reasonably bad taste. So roasting is the processing technique which gives a very nice taste, and especially the roasted grey peas were fantastic, while the germinated flowers were not all by taste well. But then again, you cannot taste flowers very easily. You would need to produce a food and test them then as ingredient in the food. And you would not be able to use these flowers because they don't have the perfect baking properties as a whole or sole ingredient. You always have to mix them then to get the gluten structure with some wheat flour.
Okay, thanks. I think we have to move on in the program, and now it's Per Modig from Fagraslätt that will tell us a little bit about his cultivation. So Gun, can you please start the video and then we'll continue with the presentation.
Yeah, my name is Per Modig. I work partly as a farmer and partly as advisor at Hushållningssällskapet in Skåne. So at Hushållningssällskapet I work as advisor in organic production to other farmers. And here at Fagraslätt, that's my farm, I work with my brother and we are growing organic and all types of crops, and I have legumes like beans, fagioli beans, lentils, peas, and also quinoa, and we try different types of crops, chickpeas and chia, and yeah, you name it.
We can't hear you.
So please share your screen, Per, and unmute yourself.
I'll try to. Now I hope you can see my screen. Is it possible?
Yeah.
And can you hear me?
Yes.
Nice. Yes, as you saw in the movie, my name is Per Modig. I work both as advisor at Hushållningssällskapet and on my farm together with my brother Niklas Svensson. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our farm and what we're doing and challenges and what we have done to it. I started in 2009. I tried with 5 different types of beans on half a hectare, only in a real small scale. And it was because I read about a trial with those beans, and I got in contact with the person who had this trial, and I received some seed, and I used it to sow in the next year. And yeah, many people said it was impossible to grow these kinds of beans. It was only possible to grow brown beans in Sweden, I was told. But I felt I had to try, and after that I continued with beans, and then I have started with different types of pulses. I've tried many of them through the years. So now we have, together with my brother, we have 160 hectares organic cultivation, and in this land we have as much pulses as we can. So this year we have somewhere between 20 or 25 hectares of pulses, where 4 types of beans: black, white, kidney, and colored one. We have different types of peas: gray peas, yellow peas, some new types of peas. We have lentils. You may not call them pui lentils, but it's the same type of lentils. We also had some soybeans. The birds took them, but we sowed some soybeans at least. We have tried with chickpeas. We have a cultivation of quinoa, and we also have some different other seeds. So this has become the main thing I do. I try different types of pulses and other seeds, and we dry and sort it and sell it. From a small scale experiment in 2009, we now have this as the main thing we do at Fagraslätt. Starting growing beans in 2009, we recognized it was possible to grow those beans, despite many people said it wasn't possible. The cultivation was no problem, but in this small scale we had many challenges, really. The first and quite big is the harvest. It's the beans, they mature late in the season, and it's sometimes hard to find good harvesting weather. And you also, it would be best to have a specialized harvesting machine, but we only have a usual combine harvester. So we use that machine, and it's possible, but it's not the best thing. Then we had some challenges with drying these small quantities of each bean. And then after that, we had the biggest challenge that I'm going to talk a little bit more about, the sorting and the cleaning after the harvest and the drying. Because it's possible to find someone who can sort bigger amounts of seeds, but to sort small amounts, it's not easy to find. After that, we have, of course, challenges with packing when we hadn't done it before, so we had to find ways to do it in a good way and find ways to sell in good ways. So many challenges in this small scale. It really was. It's different. Many companies are willing to buy. If you have 100 tons of kidney beans, yes, and you can supply 100 tons each year, the next 5 years, then it's possible to sell. But to sell small scale, then you don't know how much it is and how soon you can make it. That's a challenge. So this that's a border for new crops, that you start in a small scale and you don't have 100 tons first year. But sorting and cleaning it's a big challenge that I'm going to talk a little bit more about. So it's difficult, as I said, it's difficult to clean small batches of pulses and other crops, like 50 to 5,000 kilograms. If you have more than that, you can find a bigger company that can clean your seed. But if you only have a small amount, it's difficult. So since 2009, we have had many tests at Fagraslätt, different ways to clean, more or less work by hand of this when we have used different types of machines. So we have tried different machines and equipments of different origins. We have built some of our own and found in different places. But since some years ago, we have good machines. We bought new machines. As you can see in the picture, it's laboratory machines that we have modified slightly for higher volumes. So now we have good machines that can clean these small scale crops that we grow. So the benefits of this equipment that we have, we can sort, we can clean these small batches, like from 50 to 5,000 kilograms. That we can do I think better than many others. We easily can change sort. We can change from beans to peas or lentils easily, and it's easy to clean the machines, and we don't lose so much as you do in bigger equipment. And of course, we are more expensive per kilogram than bigger places are. But I think we can do things that others can't, I think. And I was asked to talk a little about that, but what we should have done more, what we need and what we have missed in this what we have done. And I think the main thing that you always miss is space. We have built some new houses with store and places to pack and to load that what we have cleaned, and we also have made some old house possible to use these sorting machines in. But yeah, you need more space. We should have built bigger houses for with place for drying, with before the sorting. We should have had more place for store, both before cleaning and after cleaning, and we should have had room for bigger equipment. Now we see we could have had this equipment is it's in a small scale. It's good when you have smaller amounts, but if you have some amounts that are more than like 5 tons, 10 tons of each, then we should have had at least one machine that has a bigger capacity. And right now we have no place for it. So more space in the buildings is the main thing that I think of that we miss in this investigation. I think that that was what I had prepared for talking about. I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Per. Can you stop sharing, please?
Yes.
So prepare for the next speaker. Okay, so any questions for Per?
Susanna here.
Yes.
I would like to ask you about your certification. You mentioned organic certification. And what kind of certification do you have? CAV certification or EU certification? And why do you have that kind of certification?
Yeah, we have a CAV certification. Yeah, and then you have both EU and
Yes.
CAV, of course. And yeah, it's the main certification in Sweden for organic production. I think it's maybe not necessary, but almost. If you want to sell to most people know CAV, and most people don't know the EU. So yeah. And you don't choose for one crop. You choose for the whole farm, and it's necessary to have CAV if you want to sell other crops to other buyers.
Thank you for your answer.
Okay, any more questions?
Åsa.
Åsa, yes.
Hi, so yes, Per, I was thinking in most other agriculture, it's very cereal intensive, but I guess your agriculture is legume intensive, so to speak. So how is that affecting with diseases and stuff? If I understand correctly, you don't have much cereals. So what kind of crop rotation do you have?
Yeah, as I said, we have like 160 hectares that we use, and we have a crop rotation in that land. So 20-25 hectares with pulses, it's maximum. So we have every 6th or every 7th year we have pulses. So the rest of the land, yeah, there we have some cereals. We have quinoa, of course, as I mentioned, potatoes, carrots, onions, many different crops. So every 6th or 7th year we have pulses in the crop rotation.
Any more questions for Per? Have you tried something that absolutely did not work? Any crop or cultivar that?
Oh yes, many. Soybean is a real challenge because of the birds. In fact, pigs we have a problem with, but you can close them out with a fence. But birds are hard to close out, especially when you grow in small plots. So you should have bigger fields, then it would be a less problem. But it's a big problem with birds in soybeans. And of course, I have we have tried chickpeas some years, 2 years now, and I'm not convinced that it's possible to grow in Sweden. We will see. And yeah, sorghum I tried some years ago. It was no hit for me. It maybe can be in other places, but yeah. And of course, cultivars that are suitable for Italy or China may not be well suited for Sweden. Yeah.
Okay, so what's the next step now? Will you build bigger houses, or what will you do?
Maybe we need bigger stores and places for some bigger machines, maybe. But the main challenge is to be better in everything we do.
Thank you. Any more questions for Per? I cannot see any hands here.
Hello.
Yeah,
I have one question. Hello, Per. I had to walk away for a minute, so I don't know if anyone's asked this, but how do your neighboring farmers see your experiments today? Have they also adopted legumes?
I would say no. If we talk about my neighboring farmers, no. I don't know really, but I think they see me as quite special and something that they don't do. But you shouldn't ask that question to them, maybe. I have affected some of my organic farm friends or customers at my work as advisor. So yeah, lentils and some different types of peas, and so it's cultivated around in Skåne, but not my neighbors so much.
All right, thank you. I was fishing for if anyone's watched it in person and how that influences adoption.
Yeah, of course. I have many visitors, and so some people I think adopt some of it. Of course.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Per. Then
Thank you very much.
Yeah, then we move on to Åsa Grimberg and her project about faba bean. So please, Gun, can you play the movie?
So hi, my name is Åsa Grimberg. I'm working as a researcher and teacher at the Department of Plant Breeding at SLU in Alnarp. I'm working with seeds. That is one of the major raw materials for our food. And more precisely, I'm doing research on the genetic regulation of seed quality. Today I'm out here in the field outside Svalöv, and I'm harvesting faba bean seeds of a lot of different genotypes. Actually, it's 250 different genotypes. And I will tell you more about how our project hopefully can contribute to an increased cultivation of legumes and the use of those in food in Sweden. Okay, I would like to start to thank the organizer for giving me the opportunity to share with you some of the activities that are ongoing in our faba bean project at SLU that started in 2019. This project is financed by SLU Grogrund, which is a center for breeding of food crops, which is based on the needs that were described in the Swedish government's food strategy a few years ago. So I want to start with reminding us that we are fully dependent on plants' ability to convert solar energy into chemical energy in the form of starch, oil, protein, and sugars, which are usually stored in seeds or in tubers. And this, as we know, is the raw material for all our food, no matter if we first give it to the animals or if we eat it directly. And the proportions and also the quality of these storage products in seeds of different crops or in different varieties of the same crop will determine the end use of this crop. And here in the photos you can see some of the crops that I'm working with in my research. It's faba bean, quinoa, and oat, and below you can see the seeds of the respective crops. And my research interest, as I told in this introduction movie, is in the genetic regulation of seed quality and how we can use such knowledge to breed for improved plants that we need. So our project regarding faba bean, we aim to develop breeding tools for faba bean to secure a sustainable primary production in the future. If we look at the plant protein situation in Europe, I guess this is well known for many in this audience, but we can see that a very high share, 93%, is used for feed and only 7% is used for food. And more than half of it, 63% of all this used plant protein is imported. And we know that we are highly dependent on especially soybean import. This you can see by these light green parts of the bars. Or this is for the soybean here. So legumes in Europe is only grown on approximately 3% of the arable land. And I should say that this figures is from an e-report some years ago. So we don't grow very much legumes in Europe yet, but this is at the same time that we know that we need to change how we eat. We will most probably in the future need to eat less meat and more vegetables, as Cornelia was talking about also before. So these words here is from an Eat Lancet Commission summer report a year ago. And here in this report, the legumes are really mentioned, that we really need to eat more legumes. So that means we need to grow more legumes. So what are the benefits? Where is this connection between a more sustainable planet and eating more legumes? It's the nitrogen fixing ability that is very important, of course, to mention. This is through the rhizobium symbiosis between the legumes and this bacteria that produces nodules in the root system. And this will fertilize the soil for the coming crop. So these plants does not need to be fertilized much. Another benefit is to break the disease cycles that we have in our very cereal intensive agriculture. We grow a lot of cereals today in agriculture. So by growing more legumes, we will increase our self-sufficiency of plant proteins. And if we eat more legumes directly, instead of first giving them to our animals, then we can decrease our meat consumption. It's also, we have to say, that's very trendy in healthy food, at least for some consumer groups. And I think you also know that the market has been really exploded with different food products based on legumes, and there has been big market investments done the last years. So this is where our project comes into focus. Our vision is to meet our country's demand for protein-based food and feed products by increasing the domestic production of high-qualitative protein crops. The participants are SLU, and then I'm working at the Department of Plant Breeding, and I have several colleagues taking part in this project. It's Landsmen and Agriculture, it's former Lyckeby, now Sveriges starkaste producenter, and also Kalmar Ölands trädgårdsprodukter that we'll talk later today. As I mentioned, so our project is working very close to the primary production. So if we should eat more legumes, we need really to produce them. And then we also need plant breeding. And for the ones in the audience who's not very has not been working much with plant breeding or know what it is, just to very briefly mention what is it. This is one definition. It can be called the science, art, and business of improving plants for human benefit. And if we just remind us what plant breeding in the most historical form, we have our crops today looking like this, for example, when it comes to tomato or maize, even look much bigger than this. And here on the side, you can see their wild ancestors. So this is in the most historical form of plant breeding. But we should say that plant breeding is a continuous process to meet the current and future needs and challenges that we are facing. And today we're using more delicate tools, usually including looking at DNA patterns in plant individuals to find the best ones for our purposes, and that we then can cross together and so on. Okay, so why did we choose faba bean and invest in breeding for our country? Well, among the different legumes, faba bean has a high protein content, around 30%, in combination with high potential for high yields. A mean value for Sweden today is around 3.5 tons per hectares, but in other parts of Europe, you actually can reach 7 tons per hectare. Plant breeding of faba bean has been absent since the 19th, so there's a gap which we can fill. And also we believe there's a high potential for increased growth in our Swedish climate. This is showing some figures on faba bean cultivation a few years ago. The darker green, the higher percentage of the arable land is used for faba bean cultivation. And we can see that at most it's 2 to 3% of the arable land in some regions that is grown with faba bean. We can also see that it is possible to grow it from south to south of Norrland. The majority is still used for animal feed, and I believe that will be probably also in the future, but hopefully a transition into using it more into food. We believe that new varieties that are better adjusted for food can give an increased economic value for the farmer who can sell it to food purposes instead, and also an experienced increased value for the consumer who can buy food products based on domestic produced legumes. One challenge in our Swedish climate is that this crop has a very long growth period. So it means that the more north we go, high risk that you cannot reach maturity before harvest. And there's also risk for drought. These crops, or this crop is sensitive for drought during the flowering period, which was, of course, very much clear during 2018. Another interesting thing to mention is that so we really want early varieties to shorten the growth period, but also one interesting product can be to harvest the fresh seeds when they're green and then freeze them. So it will be a harvest technique as we use with the green peas. Then we eat them as a vegetable instead. And actually I should note that there are other initiatives in Sweden going on right now regarding that type of product. So very briefly, I always think it's very interesting to think of the history of our crops, and actually me and a colleague are putting together a course in this topic on different crops. So if you're interested, please, you can contact me. It will be next summer. But faba bean is one of the earliest domesticated crops of Near Eastern agricultural systems. And actually in some regions and periods, its cultivation was banned. Here on the picture, you can see the Greek philosopher Pythagoras. So he banned his followers from eating faba. It was associated to decay. But in other regions and periods, it was highly regarded for the benefits. And actually there was a big feast, fabaria, that was celebrated in ancient Rome. And that was in celebration to Carna, which was a goddess of vital organs and health. So it has been different views on this crop. In our project, we are developing a breeding program. This is initially based on the best available commercial varieties. This work is done at Lantmännen. We are assembling a seed collection. Right now we have 380 genotypes from gene banks all over the world and commercial breeders. So this is supposed to show high genetic diversity, because that's what we're interested in. We will characterize part of this seed collection in field during 2 years and 2 locations in Sweden. And we have just been amplifying this gene bank material now in the field outside Svalöv actually. We will genotype the same seed collection, and that means we will look at the DNA patterns. Then we will connect all this data, and by doing that, we can develop breeding tools that is called genetic markers for specific traits. We also are doing some in-depth studies of specific traits of interest, for example, plant architecture, and that can be important to get a more homogeneous maturation of the beans, which can be important for these green fresh harvested beans. So what we want to do, we can call it tap off the genetic diversity of faba bean to breeders and farmers, and then finally to the consumers. So when we think about genetic diversity, that's something we really need to be able to do plant breeding. And in faba bean, here is one example of the high genetic diversity available. Here are 6 varieties from Norgene, and this is showing different seed phenotypes of faba bean. We have the big flat seeds down here, which is typically called bondbana, typically is big flat seeds. And also we have some other varieties with more round seeds and in other colors. But we will not, of course, only look at seed phenotypes, even though that is very important if we're going to have them in the field. Traits of interest that we will characterize in this seed collection will be yield, of course, very important for the economy. We will look at earliness, as I mentioned, that's very important for our country. Seed types, I mentioned. Seed quality, we will do a lot of seed quality analysis. We will do protein, starch, and oil content, sometimes also quality. And the nutritional factors that Cornelia just talked very much about is important in faba bean, especially one specific among the legume crops is convicin vicin, which some people cannot eat because they cannot metabolize it. Flower color, there's already white flowering varieties on the market. Those are low in tannins in the seed coat, in the peel. So if it's low in tannin, it's better suitable for feed for some animals, because tannins can decrease the nutrient uptake. However, if we go for food, we can all probably afford to take that tannins away, because we can afford to peel these seeds. Plant architecture, I mentioned, how they grow is also important. We might look at height, branching, and if they are determinate or not. That means if they stop to flower, because faba bean has one problem, they never want to stop flower. So you will get beans in different stages. And of course, very important that affects the yield, that's resistance to diseases, insects who have very much increasing problem with the bönsmyg, Swedish, and also resistance to drought. Just one example of what type of diversity we have in our seed collection. So here we can see seed sizes in seed length of 179 of the different genotypes we have. Here we have a group called the major ones. These are the having fairly big seeds, and then we have the one with middle-sized seeds and the one with minor, very small seeds. So achievements this far. So the breeding program has started. So there are seeds amplified from the first crosses made, and the seeds are sent to different parts of the world to use the counter season to amplify seeds. We have put together this seed collection, and 250 of them have been amplified in the field. So we have been harvesting the last weeks now, actually. We are developing screening protocols for field trials to screen for all these different traits. We are doing the molecular work for so-called precision markers for these determinant plants. We're also planning for the field trials the 2 coming years. And I also want to mention that one achievement, I think, is that we have this collaboration in Grogrund with researchers, breeders, primary producers, and food industry to define the breeding goals in our crops together. So I think this is my final slide, just to show some of the ongoing activities. Here on top, you see our field trial. And yes, it looks a bit strange. All the plants we needed to be covered with a plastic bag, because faba is actually a partially cross-pollinating species. So to keep them pure, we needed to cover them. That was quite a bit of work, but now we are happy to have harvested quite some seeds. We also had big problems with birds, I have to say. Some doves were taking many of the seeds. In the middle row, you see some of the lab activities ongoing. We have our students, our PhD student Hanna and another student doing molecular work. Here we see this type of determinant plant, which actually knows how to stop flower and put pods also in the top of the plant, which can give a more homogeneous maturation. We also are having found very interesting mutants present from the previous breeder in Svalöv, Jan Sjödin, who produced a mutation population. So here we see a dwarf mutant, actually. So we're looking into such as well. And in the bottom, there's a photo from our team visit at Kalmar Ölands trädgårdsprodukter, where we learned about their production of different types of beans. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. And here are the people that are listed that are involved in the project. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Åsa. Any questions for Åsa? Yes, Robin? No, that was a clap. Sorry. Any questions? Yes, then I would like to ask, you mentioned that there was plant breeding ongoing earlier from up to 1990, and then there is a new breeding project now. So are there any differences in the traits that you are working on now compared to the traits that the earlier project was working on?
I think typically what they aimed for then was a good seed size and shape, which means small and round seeds so that they did not get stuck in the sowing machines, and also earlier varieties. And usually early varieties have come from Finland. They grow some faba beans, so there has been some material from there. So these were the 2 focus traits. Now, of course, we also want early material. As I said, it's still a very important trait. We look, of course, at yield will be very important. That's always very important. I think one increasing problem, as I mentioned, has been this burn SMEs. So if we would find any differences in genotypes there, it would be very interesting. And I also think that in this Grogrund project, we now also have the possibility to really see if we can find, which I think would be very interesting, to see if we really see any seed quality differences. It might be that there are varieties with different starch qualities. There even might be some with slightly higher oil content. As someone mentioned, soybean, for example, is kind of a dual crop. It's high in protein, but there are also varieties with high oil. That would be interesting if that would be useful for the industry, for the food producers and so on.
There are a question in the chat, Åsa.
Let's see.
So what was the, no, that was the old one.
Oh, yeah, that's.
Did I miss it?
No.
Yeah, I have not made any germination studies yet. No.
No. It was just mentioned here.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah.
So one question, you mentioned a little bit about the end uses that might be of interest, green, harvest, and now you talked a little bit about the oil content. So can you see something now, some end uses of faba bean already, or?
I think that has been discussed with some of the participants here as well. I think to produce flour from these pulses, I guess I'm not a food producer, but I know others are very interested in such a product, which I guess can be used for many different purposes. We should also say that one very much increasing product on the market are these vegetable burgers. There has been huge investments in using yellow peas, for example, as a raw material for burger production. Of course, that's highly processed food, but for the consumers that are interested to eat more green stuff but don't change their habits too much, I think such product can be the bridge to eat more vegetables. But I assume that others in this audience will know better what the consumers really want.
Okay, thank you. I cannot see any more questions for Åsa. So yes, Susanna?
Yes, I have one. Concerning traits of interest, are you working with the taste of the beans?
I should be honest, we have it on the list. We would really like to see if we could make any sensory taste studies. I have to admit right now, we are not sure if the budget will allow all the way to that, but we hope that it will be some taste studies in the end when we have made all the field studies. That is of the primary importance for our breeding program right now. But it's of course, taste is interesting. I also think that, for example, for these products like the green, fresh frozen harvested beans, the taste of faba bean can be much more interesting than soybeans. But I think for the bulk products, I can imagine that a neutral taste and color would be a raw material that can be used for many different products.
Yes, I can see Cornelia waving.
And please, Cornelia, unmute.
Yeah, I can just let you know, Åsa, that we've done some studies with Egyptian fresh vegetable faba beans, and I can send you some paper regarding that. I'm just preparing a mail for you. And they are eaten in Egypt very traditional, like we eat normal green trädgårdsböna, and they are very nice and mild, and so it's a good vegetable to eat.
It is. I really like to make to have these. You can buy them in the freezers in the stores. Yes. Typically or usually they are not from Sweden, but from these other initiatives that I talked about, there have been some production, very small one, but in Sweden. But it's very nice to have in salads with some cheese and stuff.
It definitely has potential, and you can use it instead of sugar snaps.
Yep. And I just want to add there, so there is an ongoing project right now. It was originally run by Innovatum in Trollhättan. So actually, for several years' time, they've tried this. There have been challenges with the harvesting technique and so for this green, fresh, frozen harvest. But actually, they had some trials this year with different varieties as well.
And one last mention with respect to the favism, which you also mentioned. It is true that this is an enzyme defect which some humans have, but in Europeans this enzyme defect is very, very seldom. So it needs to be marked, of course, that people who have favism don't eat these products, but it is for the broad population not a problem at all to eat faba beans and have problems with favism.
Yeah. And anyhow, it's of course an interesting breeding trait to get as low content of these compounds as possible. And actually there are varieties that are said to be low. I'm not sure if they're always low, but
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Then I suggest we take a break. We are a little bit late, but according to the schedule, we will start again at 10:20. So see you again in a couple of minutes. Then we have the next speaker today, and that is Anna Henning Moberg from Torsåker X Foundation. So Gun, please start the movie.
Hi dear legume colleagues, my name is Anna Henning Moberg and this is Torsåker Farm. We are located 30 kilometers north of Stockholm and this is X Foundation's test farm and development center for future sustainable food production.
When we started the Torsåker project in 2017, we wanted to find an alternative to the most used meat in Sweden, minced meat from beef and pork. As you probably know, we love our meatballs and tacos here. We wanted to create a product that is produced in a sustainable way, has a low impact on the climate, and, most important, also tastes good. So welcome into our test kitchen.
The result is this product, Swedish minced legumes, based on sweet lupin, broad bean and grey pea. A mince that is currently served everywhere from schools and restaurants to households. Before we started, we gathered stakeholders from the food chain for a workshop here at the farm. There were retailers, chefs, farmers and researchers to discuss which crops may be best suited. Then we started growing them here on the farm to find out their sensory and nutritional properties in order to create an attractive product.
So please, Anna, share your screen and unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I will. Hi, everybody. You see it?
Yes.
Okay. So since the organization I work for is different from the other speakers today, I thought I would tell you a little bit about X Foundation first. We are an independent, non-profit sustainability organization that has existed since 1993, and we operate under 4 programs. And we see ourselves as more of a do tank than a think tank. These are the 4 programs that we operate under. At first, Future Food, where I work, here at the farm. The second one is Sustainable Production and Consumption. Third one is Circular Economy. And at last, Inclusive Societies. Under the program Future Food, we use 3 focus areas to address the problem. The protein shift, efficient use of resources, and sustainable farming and aquaculture methods. And the farm is a test farm and development center. And our ambition with Torsåker is it to be a catalyst that contributes to the development of the sustainable future Swedish production, innovation, knowledge sharing, product development, and consumption of sustainable food. Torsåker consists of fields, forests, meadows, gardens, and a restaurant kitchen, which gives us the ability to grow, raise, breed, and develop new methods, new food products, and new meals together with others. And this merging of different skills is necessary to make tomorrow's products both better and tastier. We want Torsåker to be a place where sustainability, nutritional content, and taste overlap and amplify each other. Our projects should be in the intersection between research and practice. Sustainability always comes first for us, but we also always make sure to include nutritional content as an important parameter. Good food is becoming more and more a class issue, which we must change. And last but not least, the taste, of course. In the future, we may have to, but right now, there are a few people who want to eat food that does not taste good, no matter how sustainable it is. Our projects are always based on a practical sustainability challenge. When we have defined it in our own working group, we gather stakeholders from across the food chain in question to discuss the issue together and then take joint action. You may think that this is obvious, but it's actually very rare that, for example, primary producers meet market participants. What happens when everyone meets is that you stop blaming the problem on those who come before or after you in the chain. Instead, everyone begins to take responsibility and find a will to contribute to the solution. Therefore, primary producers, researchers, food processors, chefs, and entrepreneurs come together in our projects here at Torsåker to jointly find the solutions to complex problems. Today, we work with about 10 projects within our program area Future Food, and here are our 4 examples. Our projects are bigger than we are because we run them together with other organizations. And we have an informal motto here, that is, our food should not eat our food. Not least, as you said, Åsa, because over 70% of all arable land is used for animal feed. And this is the idea behind the project, 5 tons of green fish in a counter that we operate together with you guys at the SLU. Farmed fish is often fed cereal, soy, and wild-caught fish, and we want to test substitution of general feed with insects that we eat an organic waste, such as peel, core, and bread waste. And again, together with you guys at the SLU and the Land Institute, we conduct a larger experiment here at Torsåker Farm since 2018 to try to breed perennial wheat that suit the Nordic conditions. Today, mainly large predatory fish, such as pike perch and pike, are captured in the Swedish lakes, while all fish further down the food chain is left in the lakes or thrown back as bycatch. And this means that these species increase in numbers and creates an imbalance in the ecosystem. So here is a large quantity of unused seafood resources in the lakes, while almost 70% of all fish consumed in Sweden is imported. And from that fish, we have developed new products, especially for public kitchens. And my 4th example is our experimental garden here at Torsåker Farm, where we evaluate different kinds of farming techniques for new as well as forgotten crops. And we are proud to collaborate with the Nordic Genetic Resource Centre, which provides us with seeds from crops that used to be grown in Sweden and therefore are adapted to our latitudes. So now I will finally start talking about what we have gathered for today, how we have developed a product on Swedish grown legumes. What can and should we eat to stay within the planetary boundaries and at the same time contribute to better public health? Since we are working with some of the researchers who were involved in the Eat Lancet report, we had an idea of their recommendations when we started working here at Torsåker in 2017. Less meat and more legumes, both for health and the climate. But if there is less meat we should eat, what produce of meat do we use the most? Well, this was easy. We love minced meat in Sweden, and it is without a doubt the meat produce we eat the most and thus need to replace. However, not all meat is bad. That is important to remember, but we need to eat less and better. So we knew we needed to replace minced meat and had to find out which protein crops could replace that produce, but still fill in the same purpose. We tried to identify our target group, learn as much as possible about their preferences, what kind of products they use today, and how they use it. How much time do they spend in the kitchen making dinner every night? The more you find out about your dream customer, the better you will be at product development. Swedish families only really cook over the weekends, and during the remaining weekdays, they assemble different products to prepare their dinner. It could be a ready-cooked sauce from the dairy counter that they pour over a piece of salmon and stuff in the oven. So this is the behavior that we must take into account. There is no point hoping that the consumer will soak and cook legumes, not if you want to reach a larger target group. So our big hairy goal is to increase Swedish legume cultivation and replace imported minced meat. Because if we reduce our meat consumption with 50%, our domestic meat production would be enough. So when we started our practical work here at Torsåker in January 2017, already in March the same year, we gathered researchers, farmers, and food processors who were knowledgeable and interested in legumes here at the farm. And after that, we decided to grow sweet lupin because it was the most similar to soy and a crop that we import a huge amount of every year here in Sweden. Second was grape pea, because it was grown on a large scale in Sweden in the past, plus it is incredibly tasty. And finally, broad bean, because it's already grown, as the other guy said, here in a big scale. But it's almost only used for feed, and we wanted to evaluate it as food. And for me, the next step was about getting to know each legume and its area of use very, very carefully. Then I started combining them and added residues from the production of cold-pressed rapeseed oil, just because I needed more fat. The result was a product that I started cooking minced meat dishes from and presenting them to various market players. And one day I made lasagna and served it to the head of operations for one of Sweden's largest meat wholesalers, without him noticing that it was not made from meat. And then I understood that we had a product that was worth investing in. We understood that there would be a lot of growing pains before we could take our product to a larger market. Therefore, we started to cooperate with a delicatessen chain that started to use it in a small scale. In that way, we could fine-tune the ingredients together with the client. And only 6 months later, we were confident enough to turn to Sweden's largest food wholesaler. And thus, we have given the product to a company that can take it longer, because Axe Foundation is a non-profit organization. And what happens next is actually up to them. But though, to our great joy, a large part of the legumes for the legume mince are grown by Kalmar Öland Trädgårdsprodukter today. Finally, I just want to summarize why we chose to make a legume mince. About 70% of the meat from a slaughtered cow becomes minced meat, and it's the meat produced that we use most in Sweden, and thus we have the greatest need to replace. An ordinary Swedish family with children has an average of 11 favorite dishes that they cook over and over again. Several of them contain minced meat. And minced meat is extremely useful and can be used in a lot of dishes from all food cultures in the world, from cabbage pudding, that is an old Swedish specialty, to Greek moussaka, and of course meatballs and tacos. And all of these dishes, you can replace the minced meat with minced legumes. And many people want to eat locally produced, nutritious, unprocessed, and plant-based, but do not have the time to soak and cook legumes. And we must make it easy to do the right thing. So one of my strongest recommendations is to be careful with products that requires a new behavior from the consumer. We all have problems with breaking a creature of habit. Well, I have so many obstacles. I forgot a lot. I'm thankful that I forgot most of them, because it's been a bumpy road, this. But one obstacle is that you have to take your microbiological test from a clean environment that you may not have in your own test kitchen. And the Swedish rules, and thus your customers' rules, requires to know days of shelf life and also your product's nutrient content. And these tests are all very expensive, and you may have to do them several times. And as Per already mentioned, it's difficult to find legally approved food handling facilities that can clean, sort, peel, and package legumes. And these steps between farmers and the industrial kitchens are really missing in Sweden today. Another challenge for us was to scale up the recipe. Every ingredient behaves completely different on a large scale. And perhaps maybe the most frustrating challenge is to meet the market's low willingness to pay for quality and sustainability. It's really hard to recoup investments cost for food startups today. Well, so I asked myself, if we had not been a sustainability organization, would we have dared to be so stubborn that everything from field to fork must be sustainable with this product? Well, we are humbled that not everyone can work the way we do. And I really admire the rest of the entrepreneur speakers today for daring and sharing. So thank you.
So thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you.
Very interesting. Any questions for Anna?
I can see one.
Yeah, there is one in the chat.
Well, we, of course, attend to seminars and conferences abroad, especially with you guys in the Baltic countries, because you are experts on pulses and get a lot of inspiration. But I would not say that we cooperate. It's more we have discussions and talk to colleagues in the other Nordic countries. But I'd love to.
Åsa, yes.
Thank you, Anna, for a very nice presentation. I would like to ask, you mentioned in your last slide this lack of infrastructure handling legumes. Can you just comment on that, and do you see any change in the future, you think, or what do you think about that?
Well, I hope that the big players will start to invest in this now, because I speak to farmers every week that's calling us that wants to grow a new source of legumes, but they don't have anyone who wants to buy them. So that was actually why we started to develop and produce legume mince. I mean, it started to be a proof of concept. This is something that you could do, but we really wanted to get things started. So we hope that we have inspired another companies to develop similar products, so that the farmers can find a market for Swedish grown legumes. But today, if you want to find somewhere to just peel dried legumes, it's really, really hard. I know that Per can do it, but I mean, his facilities will not be enough in the future. And of course, Kalmar Öland, they are doing a lot right now, but we need more.
Any more questions for Anna? I have a question then about this. When you talked about Tusok in the beginning, you talked about a lot of different projects that are ongoing. So who is taking the initiative to this project? Is it do the researchers approach you, and how is it starting actually, the projects?
Well, 3 years ago when I started and we started up Future Food Program, almost nobody knew anything about us. But now, it has been in the past, it's been our initiatives. But now it's more frequently researchers contacting us, and I'm so happy about that. It's amazing, because we love to cooperate with you guys.
Yeah. And are you then putting them in contact with others within the area? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a friend, Lina Gordon, at the Stockholm Resilience Center. There she calls me the Tinder for researchers. Yeah, the matchmaking, because that's absolutely what we do, because we have contact with all the stakeholders in the food chain. So absolutely, that's what we do.
Okay, any more questions for Anna?
I saw one in the chat, I think.
Yeah, there is one.
Let's see. Did you mince develop a mix of legumes? I mix. I have a mix of legumes in the minced legumes. Absolutely, because they're totally different. As I said, I use the sweet lupin because of its high protein content, and I use broad bean or fava bean because of its umami tasting skills. It's really have this body that contributes to the mixture. And I use the grape because it's so nutty and flavorous. So as I said, I started out with each one of them to really get to know them. So they're all soaked differently. They are all steamed differently before we mixture them. So absolutely, I mix them.
Is there time for one more question, Helena?
Yes, there is.
I was thinking of this mixing. I guess it's more a challenge to mix different crops like this. both from the technical point of view, but is there, and I guess, is it also from a regulation point of view as a food producer to mix different crops?
Well, I don't know exactly what you mean, but of course, the more you handle them, the more micro bacteria you can get into them. But I mean, if you have good facilities and work really clean, I don't think it's a problem with regulations. I mean, of course, you have to. I mean, the sweet lupin is allergenic, so you have to write out that on the label. But I'm really interested in that crop, so I didn't want to put it out because I think it's one of the most interesting crops to work with. Yeah, but I mean, this is only the beginning. We or the company that will take over Means Legumes now, they will develop a lot of new products. So maybe they do different blendings in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Then we were supposed to listen to Pia now from Swedish Temptations, but I cannot really see her among the participants. Have you heard anything from her, Gun?
Yes, we have sent an email to each other, and she said she will connect in time, and I have also sent a link to her but I can't see her either. So maybe we will change a little bit.
Yeah, so Anneli, are you ready then to present your... no, there she is. Sorry, there is Pia.
Yeah, okay, very good.
Just in time. Then you have to wait a little bit, Anneli. I think that's okay, yes. So then we will hear about product Berta, and please, Gun, can you start?
I'm the founder of Berta, a product made from Swedish organic split peas that we sprout and ferment, and then we marinate them into different products. Well, it was a culinary epiphany a few years ago. I was experimenting in my own kitchen with fermenting different kinds of food. And then I tried this traditional mold fermentation and combined with sauerkraut and yogurt made from cashew nuts. And it was just too good to not do something with. So that's how I started, and I started a food truck. And then from the food truck, it kind of transitioned into this company that makes products for retail and food service. We have burgers and chili and lime chunks and the plain product that people can flavor themselves. And then we have a smoked product that is quite new, so it's only sold in a few stores so far. We sell the product to retail in Sweden, and it's both small local stores and the big retailers, and also to restaurants.
So please, Pia, share your screen and unmute yourself.
Yeah, do you hear me? Great. Let's see. That one. And can you see the presentation? Great. Okay. Yeah. So Pia, I'm Pia, and yeah, so a lot of the things I planned to say in the beginning are already in the film, so I might skip a few slides maybe. Yeah, so I make the Berta product made from sprouted and fermented organic split pea. And we're located here. Let's see. Here in the south of Sweden, Karlshamn. I'm gonna give you the short story of how it began and why, and then I'm gonna talk more about how we upscaled or how we do it now, and also taking the product to the market. In 2014, I lived in Stockholm, worked in the arts sector, and experimented with cooking and fermenting in my home kitchen in the spare time. And this led to the culinary epiphany that made me start the food track with organic food, organic vegan fermented food. And then the main dish in all the dishes I served was this split pea tempeh. And tempeh is a traditional solid state fungal fermentation from Indonesia, which is usually based on soybean, but I used the split pea. When I made all the food in my home kitchen on the 3rd floor without any elevator, and served it in the food truck. And of course, that meant a lot of hours in the food truck, and that gave me also many ideas on how to further develop the traditional fermentation process to make the product even healthier, tastier, and with a better texture. In 2016, I got funding from the Swedish Innovation Agency to experiment. So I had a few months with a lot of different tests in my home kitchen still. And some of these tests should never be done again, but some are the first steps towards what today is Berta. I didn't have a specific plan for what I wanted to create or what would be the next step. It was a very exploratory testing. And I didn't take into consideration what it would cost to produce it, or even if it would be achievable on a larger scale. When developing the products, I wanted to challenge common beliefs that people in Sweden have against vegan food. Like, it doesn't taste good, everything's made from soy, it's full of additives, nothing's organic or Swedish. I wanted to prove them wrong. So it had to be delicious, organic ingredients without additives, and I used a split pea. It also had to be products that were easy to explain and intuitive to use, and more or less fail safe. So even a pretty lousy home chef should be able to make a decent dish with the products. And not meat-like, but plate-like. So even, I'm not trying to imitate meat in flavor and texture, but it has to be logical for people to how to use them. So it's not a completely new product that you have to invent a whole new culinary kitchen to bake. From being vegan most of my life, I knew what products were out there and I knew what was possible to achieve. And from trying products that have been launched recently, I sometimes get the impression that someone that never eats and doesn't like vegetarian food is given the task to create a vegetarian option to meat. And then they start to look for ingredients that can imitate meat in texture and flavor, and then they're content with when they reach some kind of meat-like resemblance, but they never expect the copy to be as good as the original. From my own cooking experience and from dining with friends and at good restaurants, I knew that vegan food can be delicious, and I wasn't about to settle for a bleak copy. Yes. After the project was finished, I had a few ideas for products, but was not possible to really try them before I had a proper production line. The money I got from the government was supposed to be used for consultants, lab testing and stuff like that. And I couldn't use it for actual equipment. And that's the case, of course, with almost every kind of funding. And in one way that makes sense, but it also makes it really difficult for startups who doesn't already have a factory to overcome the gap from idea to prototype. Around this time, I started the business lab program at Uppsala Innovation Centre, which is an incubator for startups. And through them, I got funding for doing a market analysis and developing the brand. I did an inventory of the markets, looking for ways to produce my products, but I found that there were no existing production lines that would create the product I wanted to make. So I had to decide, should I get a lot of money and hire consultants to make an upscale production line, or do I get some money and start small? And I chose the second path. I looked for space to rent near Stockholm, but I didn't find any landlord that was willing to rent to me. It's not easy to find people who want to rent to food production. It's expensive and complicated, and it's much easier to, they'd rather have someone who just needs storage. But by chance, I ran into the owner of this building where we are now, and he saw the potential in the product and was willing to host us here. I found some local investors and raised 200,000 euros. And for that, we bought the equipment, which is mostly used restaurant equipment. If I had chosen to go big scale immediately, it would have cost at least 10 times that, and it probably wouldn't have worked because there are so many unknown factors in the upscaling process, and it's better to do it one step at a time. But we should have started with at least 400,000. Then it would have been possible to employ myself and maybe one other person, and I wouldn't have had the constant stress of bankruptcy. And here's some other advice I would have given myself. Start small, but get enough money. Find people to ask about everything you don't know anything about. Choose a design bureau that knows food and retail. And this is something we did, and that has been a big part of what has made Berta a success. It's a really important step. Yeah, and then we have a couple of unsolved issues that are also really important to know about. As a startup company, it's really hard to be able to become a customer to the big companies. You're too small to be worth it for them. And that has made it difficult to find ingredients, to find the packaging material, machineries, everything. They don't even answer your emails. And also for me, as a woman, it's been difficult to get into the restaurant business. Some restaurants are very positive, but you can feel like the male kitchen atmosphere makes it hard for them to trust me when it comes to cooking. In June 2018, we moved the production from my home kitchen to our new kitchen in Karlshamn. And I started finalizing the recipes. At that time, we had no employees and one customer. I was lucky enough to have a friend who's head of quality for a big food company in Sweden. And he did our whole food safety plan and plan for organic production. When we had all the necessary permits and certificates and set the recipes, we had to photograph the products, wait for lab results, set the copy for the packaging before the bureau could finalize the packaging design, and then it's a few months before you actually get the packaging. So we got them in November 2018. And these are our first 3 products. It's Berta chili and lime chunks, the plain version, and the burger. Yeah, and we got them in November 2018, and the week after that, we attended Nordic Organic Food Fair in Malmö, where the burger won first prize. We also got our first customers from the fair, and a few weeks later, Berta was in a couple of stores in Sweden. At that time, it was only me and my mom working, actually making all the products. So we had to work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And that made it really difficult to find time to do the actions to get us out of that situation, which was to get more money and employ people. So again, start with a little more money, not to, so you know you have enough to actually launch when the demand is there. After that, we continued selling directly to stores, growing organically 1 store at a time, and also adapting our machineries and process as we went along. In March this year, we were listed at Berta, which is at ICA, which is the Swedish, the biggest retail in Sweden. And now you can find our products in a little more than 200 stores in Sweden. We're now 7 people employed, 4 in production, 1 in communication, the CEO and I. Since the beginning, we marketed Berta almost exclusively through social media. So we have our own channels where we show recipes and also raise questions about the food system. And we've done a few cooperations with influencers, and that has been very cost effective. You get the chance to show so much more from a cooperation like that than from a simple ad in the newspaper. And we've already only worked with people who already love the product, so we know it's a credible cooperation, that people trust them when they say that it's good. The next step is to continue the upscaling, again, raise more capital, and we start looking at exporting as well. Yeah, so that's what I plan to say.
Yes, thank you, Pia. I can see there is a question in the chat from Julita. Who is the most valuable? Oh, it disappeared, sorry. Who is the most valuable partner now and in the beginning?
It's extremely difficult to say because there are many, but maybe once again I would say the design bureau, because they didn't just have experience from working only in retail. They're like retail nerds, just going into stores, looking at packaging, communication, things like that, and they know everything from how messages are perceived on the big scale, but also how the actually plastic works for the person picking the product from the box up into the shelf. And they also had a lot of contacts in the packaging industry, so they were able to find someone who was willing to print our products. So maybe again the design bureau actually.
Pia, can you please stop sharing the screen?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Just to remind you about that. You mentioned that in some you mentioned the incubator. How important was the incubator for you?
Well, I would say it's been both bad and good. I think it gives us some credibility when talking to investors and a few contacts, but also they follow kind of a set path for how startups should work. One of the things they kept saying, and I think everyone has heard many times, is that, okay, to find investors, you need to have a team. Investors invest in teams, not ideas. And that actually set me back quite a lot because I was alone. And I thought, okay, so no one will want to invest in this. And maybe if I had heard that, I wouldn't have hesitated. So it can be both good and bad, I would say.
Any more questions for Pia?
I have one.
Yep. Robin, yes, please.
Thank you so much for sharing, Pia. My name is Robin, and I'm an agroecologist from SLU. And I turned vegan 2 years ago. So I feel what you felt is missing in the marketplace. And I'm curious if you're seeing other companies adopt similar principles now. I'm talking about producing something that is Swedish, organic, and doesn't have all these artificial ingredients, something that is more pure.
Yeah, there are a couple of few small-scale tempeh producers using split pea, lupins, but maybe not really going into this retail sector, still staying very exclusive and high-end. So I would say that we are more closer to like the meat substitutes. And I don't think anyone else is doing really that. And organic is not a big question in the vegetarian market now.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? No? Okay. No, that was Susanna, yes.
Thank you for the presentation. I would just like to ask you about the fermentation process to Berta. Why do you use the fermentation?
Well, otherwise it wouldn't be a product. It kind of creates the product. So if you were just about to wanted to use the peas and make something with that, that would be a traditional pea burger, and that it wouldn't stick together, it wouldn't have any texture, it wouldn't have the advanced flavor. So fermenting the product is not something extra, it's the product. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pia.
Thank you
for your interesting presentation. So now we'll start listening to Anneli Idman that will talk about her food track. So Gun, can you please start the video about Anneli?
Hi, my name is Anneli Idman. I have a small one-man business here in Kristianstad. I operate a vegan food truck and I serve lunches in different locations in Kristianstad on weekdays and in evenings and on weekends. I do caterings and various events like Sweden Rock or Malmöfestivalen and so on. On the menu I have vegan burgers and I make them with organically grown pulses from Fagraslätt farm here in Kristianstad. And I also do vegan soups and casseroles with the pulses and vegan cakes.
So, Anneli, please share your screen and unmute yourself.
Yes, hello. I'll try to share my screen. PowerPoint and share. So, can you hear me and see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes. So, that was a nice film. Feels like the Eurovision Song Contest. I'm Anneli Idman, and I'm here today to talk about how and why I started my food truck business using pulses. No, let's do like this. In 2014, I began to think about starting a small business of my own. Previously, I had worked as a nurse for more than 20 years. And after that, I had tried the gardening business, focusing on the edible one can grow in the garden. I live in an area where a large part of Sweden's food is grown and produced. But in the restaurant selection, I missed the locally grown and above all vegan alternatives. So therefore, I began thinking about how I could contribute with plant-based and locally grown food in my hometown. I had no experience of the restaurant business, so to open a restaurant of my own was out of the question. But I had read about the food truck business in the States and in some cities in Europe, and I thought that it seemed like a good idea to be mobile and in that way seek out my customers instead of waiting for them to come to me. I wanted to show people that it is possible to use plant-based food in an easy way. The biggest obstacle in vegan food is protein, obviously, if you want to avoid meat. Vegetables are loaded with carbohydrates, minerals, and vitamins, but it is a bit tricky to include protein if you're not used to vegan cookery. To find plant-based protein, you have to turn to the pulses, and I know that this area is an obstacle for many people in Sweden. I myself had a limited experience of pulses, mostly negative ones, from the pea soup served in school and brown beans in sauce. And it seemed to be such a hard work and labor to cook beans, washing, soaking, and cooking for hours. Nowadays, though, you can buy pre-cooked beans in cans at the grocery store. Just open up and pour in the soup, salad, or whatever, very easy and labor saving. The problem for me was that I wanted to use locally produced raw materials as far as possible. The proteins are, after all, a big deal in your everyday food, so that is a main issue and ingredient. Luckily, though, I one day found Per Modig. You have heard him here before today. At a farmer's market, I met him selling small packages of locally, organically grown beans. And bang, my business plan was perfect. I was about to use locally produced beans for vegan burgers. Per and I live not far from each other in the same area, so my raw material is very local. Now I only needed to work out the perfect recipe for these smashing burgers. 6 months later, my family was totally fed up on my burger mistakes. In the beginning, all mushy, no texture or taste, and falling apart at the first bite. But at the end, I was quite pleased with my recipe. During my experimenting with the burgers, I contacted Krenova, the incubating and science park here in Kristianstad. They have a startup center for people who want to start a business. They helped me on how to make a business plan, and I worked on the plan for a while before having the nerve to go to the bank and ask for money. After all, I needed cash to buy a food truck. I was so nervous when I went to the bank with my business plan. To tell the truth, I am hopeless with figures and numbers. I shouldn't even have a business, but well, the bank though is not bad with numbers. My first visit to the bank went accordingly. They only saw the flaws of my business plan, and I had to go home empty-handed. But I am stubborn. So I went to the next bank after doing some more calculations. It did not go well. Third bank, they almost laughed at my plan to only serve vegan food. That is not doable, they said. People want meat. You can't build a business on only vegan food. So, to satisfy the bank, I agreed to serve some kind of meat. But of course, I had no intention at all to do so. I was convinced that people would love a vegan option in the fast food market. So that was a small lie to the bank to get my money. Finally, I got my money. But I had to change the business name to Gaston and Vega instead of the Vega truck. And Gaston, by the way, is my cute dog. As soon as I got my money, I confirmed my order for the food truck that I had chosen beforehand. And after a couple of weeks, me and my son, who just had received his driver's license, flied up to the north of Sweden to get the truck. I had, for economical reasons, chosen a company that rebuilds used German mail vans instead of buying a new one. It was half the price. We drove home the truck, which took 2 days, and a long story of preparing everything in the truck started. Painting the outside and fixing everything inside. I also did a 2-day course in food safety as I do not have an education as a chef. I wanted to be sure not to do any mistakes like food poisoning. In the beginning, I thought that I could produce all my burgers in the small kitchen in the truck. Immediately, though, I realized that it was impossible due to lack of space. I sent out inquiries to all restaurants in my hometown and asked for a collaboration where I used their kitchen during close down. Finally, I got a positive answer, and during the first year, I produced my burgers on evenings and nights when the restaurant was closed. It was a tough job though, because I had to transport all of my equipment and groceries back and forth. Finally, by coincidence, I found a production kitchen that was out for rent, perfectly situated. So I was very lucky. I have now hired the kitchen for 3 years, and it absolutely saved my growing business. I have a lot of space for my everyday production, but also to hold classes in vegetarian cooking. And I also have a store part where customers can pick up pre-ordered goods. I have invested in a lot of equipment, for example, fridges, ovens, a machine that helps me make hamburger patties. The first years I made everything by hand, but when you have a batter of beans, quinoa, and other ingredients for 400 burgers, it takes too long to form each burger by hand. It is both a question of my health, I'm not getting any younger, unfortunately, and my hands are doing a lot of chopping vegetables, kneading bread dough, etc. So to above that form a lot of burger patties was almost ruining my joints. The portioning of burger batter by the machine is superb. It also is a question of food hygiene. If it takes too long to form the burger patties, the batter will be ruined because of the risk of bacterial growth. A third point of view is working hours. I just recently have begun thinking about how to minimize my working hours. For now, I am doing way too many hours for the salary I pick up, and I also need to think about my family, who do not see much of me. I know that is how it is in small businesses, but after 5 years, I think I need to reconsider how to deal with the hours, either by the help of technology or by hiring staff, or both. To have a kitchen and food service in a mobile unit has its pros and cons. One must always think about anchoring loose details like a casserole, or you are going to have unfortunate accidents in the kitchen, of which I have had a lot. Wintertime means snow time, and you better prepare to shovel snow so that the customers can reach the serving hatch. And when it is cold outside, it is freezing inside because you're not moving a lot. Summertime, when it is hot outside, you have a sauna inside. But most of the time it's just fun. It's great to be able to drive around and meet customers in so many different places and occasions. So what did it result in? I now have a small business which I support myself by, not getting rich though yet. I do lunches on weekdays on different locations according to a set schedule. On evenings and weekends, I do caterings for birthday parties, weddings, business events, etc. And in the summer, I pause the lunches to concentrate on big festivals and events. For example, Sweden Rock, different city festivals, sporting events, garden markets, beer festivals, you name it. Every weekend and most weekdays are occupied in the summer season. On the menu, I mainly have different varieties of the vegan burger, but also mainly during lunches, I have a soup or casserole of the week with home-baked bread. And in addition, I offer vegan cakes and ice cream. And I do everything myself except for the burger bread. A local bakery makes it now because I don't have the time to do it. And the ice cream, also a local chocolate bakery makes for me. In addition to my servings, I offer burger patties that are chilled and vacuum packed. The customer can thus buy to cook at home with their own favorite accessoires, or they can buy the dressings from me as well. I also sell to some restaurants who put the burgers on their menu. And recently I have also started a collaboration with art students who dye fabrics with the water from soaked beans. So instead of pouring the purple lovely water from soaked beans down the drain, it now comes to use. So was it an expected outcome? Well, if I had been younger or had more time, then I definitely would have done some restaurant training before starting anything in food business. As it became now, I've got to learn a lot of things by trial and error, which was time consuming. And as it became, yes, and now I still lack a lot of knowledge in how to do things efficiently, as I'm not from the restaurant business. Also, in the beginning, I should have hired some staff for help in the daily work. All my working hours were spent on preparing food, serving, doing dishes, cleaning, doing paperwork, etc. I really did not have time to do any planning or thinking about development, and that is my issue right now too. So I have to go forward and hire staff. Yes, that was the previous slide. obstacles and shortcomings. The greatest problem has been getting permission from the municipality, kommunen, to sell food in a public place, for example, in the town square. It took 1.5 years of meetings, correspondence, phone calls, etc., before I got my first permission for a public place. And during that time, I sold food from privately owned places, not always situated in the city center where people are moving, and therefore it was difficult to find customers in the beginning. So concluding, my recommendations to others are, if you have an idea that you believe in, and you know you are stubborn, so just go for it. It is impossible to have a grip of all the obstacles ahead and to take measures. If I had known of all the problems, then I never would have had the nerve to start the business. But now I am happy that I did go for my dream and to have a business of my own. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Anneli. Can you please stop sharing the screen? Oh, thanks. Any questions for Anneli? I can see there is a question in the chat from Anna. Thank you for a super interesting presentation, Anneli. What do you use as a binder in the burgers? We started with psyllium seeds but have switched to camellia seeds because we only want to use local ingredients. So what do you use as a binder, Anneli?
I have, let's see in English, psyllium seeds. I have rice flour and, what's the third in English? I'm a bit blocked right now. It took me a long time to figure out, because in the beginning I used egg, so they were just vegetarian. So actually I started by doing vegetarian burgers, but it was a bit messy to have special burgers for the vegans, even though they were not many. So I started to try out different vegan options to quit the egg, and finally I got to good results, and now I think the burgers hold together better than they did when I used egg. So it is the psyllium seed and the rice flour, and the third that I can't get to my mind right now. Sorry.
What is it in Swedish?
As I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
Just a moment.
Okay. So there are some more questions here from Åsa. Why did you choose black beans in your burgers? Did you also try other types of beans?
Yes, I tried brown beans and white beans. Black beans I prefer because they're not as sweet as the other beans, in my opinion. So that was the main reason.
Okay, thanks. Any more questions for Anneli? No, I have one question. You talked about Krenova, and that is kind of an incubator.
Yes.
And we heard Pia earlier. She wasn't that impressed by the incubator, but what about you? Did you get the support you needed? And were you satisfied?
Before I started, before I opened up, they were. I went there quite a few times to argue pros and cons with the business plan, and that was good. After I started the business, I got an offer to have a mentor who would help me the first 6 months. That didn't work out so well because for the first year I was so occupied with everything. Everything was chaos, to speak the truth. So I didn't have time to listen to the mentor. So it would have done more use to have the mentor after a year when I had settled down in the business a bit at least. So it was good to have arguments with them, but the mentor issue was, well, I would have preferred it after a year when I had a grip of my own business.
Okay. Thank you then. If we don't have any more questions for Anneli, we have to move on in the program for the last talk here, and that is from Kalmar Ölands trädgårdsprodukter. And Håkan, you're ready? Yes. So please, Gun, can you start the movie?
Hello and welcome to Kalmar Ölands trädgårdsprodukter. My name is Håkan Jonsson. I work as CEO. The company are owned by a total of 128 growers, and we started 1959. Most of the growers are from Öland, where we are now, but also from Gotland and from the mainland. The crops we work with are peas, beans, potatoes and onions. We grow peas and beans against contract. The peas and beans are cleaned, dried and stored, and then sold mostly for the food industry. Our largest customers for peas and beans are for the retail, and name our Lantmännen with brands like Go Green and Kungsönen, Åkla like brands like Felix, and Akra for wholesalers own brands. Once again, welcome.
Hello, my name is Oskar Sedig. I work as a production manager and also crop advisor for the growers at Kalmar Ölands trädgårdsprodukter. I've been working here for 5 years now, and it's a very interesting job. Very much out in the fields and talking with the growers. I'm also responsible for the contracts with the growers, what they should grow, and the orders of seeds and everything in order to get the crops that we want to our production. Most of the peas is grown here at Öland, but also in the mainland. But the beans is mostly on the islands, 80–90% here on Öland because of the climate. We have mostly warm and dry climate in the autumn. That is very important for the harvest of the beans. Yes, it's an interesting job and an interesting company.
So, please, Oskar and Håkan, share your screen and unmute yourself. can see this, your screen now.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
What do I? Oh, we try. No. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Kan du bläddra?
Yes.
Yeah, it's working. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, welcome. This is our factory here in Fagraslätt. It starts here in 1959, and it was a little factory, 365 square meter, and now it's a little bit bigger. We work with 4 crops: potatoes, onions, peas, and beans. And everyone is Swedish, locally grown, durable, climate smart, healthy, and protein rich. It's very nice to work with this. We do all things in from I'm selling to our customers. We have to cultivate, process, store, develop, and sell. Our grower, we have the owner is a grower, and just now we are 128 partners. 30 years ago, it was 500 owners partners, but we have the same hectares now. We are, it's around 27 people in the staff totally. We have people for the seasons, most for the onions. We are located in 3 places, and here in Fagraslätt it's the biggest, and we have onions and beans. And in Mörbylånga, it's in the south of Öland, we have the peas, and in Kalmar we have potatoes. We are the biggest producer of legumes in Sweden, and totally we have 4,000 tons, 2,000 tons beans, and it's around 2,000 tons of peas. We have 7 organic growers too. So totally 91 growers, and it's around 1,500 hectares. So, the most of the growers are located here at Öland. Here is yin yang, very nice to see, beautiful. For 8 years, we only have yellow peas and brown beans. Now we have, when we talk about the conventional beans and peas, yellow peas, gray peas, and green peas. And the beans are brown, white, black, kidney, volatile, yin yang, and faba beans. Organic beans and peas are Just now it's yellow peas and brown beans. We also have white and black sometimes. For us, organic is not so big. It's less than 5% of our volume. And if you look at Sweden totally, it's about 9% of the total food volume. So it's not so big, and we have to see what's happened with that in the future. Our largest, biggest customer, we have customers from locally, small customer here, to the biggest in Sweden. So the biggest is ICA, and we have Lidl, Maten och Servera, Orkla, Atria, Lantmännen. So it's good to share it. And we also have some export: Norway, Denmark, Italy, Austria, Holland, and Germany. Here is one of our biggest customer. It's Lantmännen, and the brand is Go Green. Now they have this white and black beans. And it's a very good customer. And here is dry. The other one was cooked before. And then this is also Lantmännen, it's Kungsholmen. And here is it's the biggest volume here. It's brown beans and yellow peas. It's Orkla with the brand Helix. They are very big. We have trials also, 2019 and 2020. We have tried to with chickpeas, lenses, faba beans, grey peas, and soldier beans. And every year we have to take have a new legume. We try. Here is a soldier bean. It's nice to see too. And we have to take advantage of the health trend and the Swedish and local ground. And we are unique, especially for the trädgårdsbönderna. And these beans are very content, 20 to 26% protein, both from beans and peas. We're also looking for new business areas all the time, and how we can come in it. As I said before, we try to have a new legume every year, and we must meet today's and tomorrow's customers. And we work hard with that. We have done some invested new this last year for the legumes. We have a new optical color sorter, brand new, and so we have this one for the beans, and the old one we have before, we have it for the peas just now. So we can take a lot of tons. We also have a new X-ray. Make it so we can do it better. We also build a new cold storage so that we can have the legumes all around the year. It's good for the quality. Yeah, and what are we doing now for the future? We are we try to start a mill that we can do pea and bean flour. We think it's a big market for that, so we work hard on that. We also try to do frozen and cooked legumes, mostly for the restaurant and yeah. So I think this is gonna be a big product too. And also we add in a lot to cooked legumes and or own way. So yes, that's what we are doing now. It's a big project, everything. So I also have Oscar here beside me, and can you say something about what's the challenge to have a beans here and machinery and so on?
Yeah, the biggest challenge is in the cultivation, the climate. We're pretty long way in north with both cold weather and rainy weather in the autumn. So yeah, the beans is very sensitive about the temperatures. In the start, it's not going to be below 0. And so it's a late sowing, and also very important with the dry autumn, so we get the mature product in a good quality for the food industry and for our customers. So that's pretty much the biggest issues in the cultivation is the climate. We have now 3 really dry years here at Öland. Yeah. It's really, really dry now. We had a little rain the last week, but the bean harvest has started. So we think it looks pretty good right now. Some fields has been too dry. It was not so much irrigation. So it's not going to be a very high yield on that fields. But all over it looks pretty good. If we see at the peas, it's more easy to get bigger volumes. It's easy to grow in the most of southern Sweden. But we have, as Håkan said, in the production here we have grown a bit. For Mörbylånga we have split the production of beans and peas in 2 lines. So we have almost double capacity. Yes. From 1 year ago. So it's a really good investment for the future. We see bigger volumes in the future.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, that was all from us.
Okay, so can you please stop sharing your screen? Thank you for interesting information. Any questions for Håkan and Oscar? I can see there is one question from the chat from Julita. Who do you collaborate with in the new product flour creation?
Yes, yeah, we work with SLU example, and we work with Linné University, and we try to collaborate it with our customer too, and but we do a lot of it for our own also. So yes. But most with the university. Yes.
So more questions? Åsa, yes?
Hey Håkan, I really like to try out the different kinds of beans, but how far are we from having a kokeri in Sweden, you think?
it's a pity that these beans needs to be sent over to other countries and then go back.
Yes, I don't think it's not so far away. But no, it's a problem. Go Green example, they send it to Italy and go back to Sweden, so it's not so good. But I think it's not so far away. We are looking together with somebody else, and yeah, we have to see it. Maybe a year or something like that. Yeah.
So, any more questions for Håkan and Oscar? This might be a very, very stupid question, but this is all year around business. What do you do during winter time? Is that is when you're handling the dried beans, or?
We only handle dry beans. Everything is for dry harvest.
Okay.
So we do the cleaning and the packaging all year round.
Okay.
Beans and peas. So it's just a little more hectic this time in the harvest, but then we have pretty much the same flow all of the year.
But for potatoes and onions, it's more season.
Season, yeah.
It's beginning now and stop in the end of May or beginning of June.
Yeah. And then you mentioned something about new business areas, and I was a little bit curious. What are the new business areas?
Yeah, but that's bean and pea flour, and as I said, also frozen cooked beans and peas. It's and maybe we should have an own brand, new brand for ourselves. We are looking at that, so we have to see.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm.
Okay. Any more questions for? No, I cannot see anyone waving.
Am I allowed to have one more question, Helena?
Yes, you are.
It's a specific one, I think, to Oscar. This bönsmyg, this little insect I talked about, which is an increasing problem in faba beans. I think they are specific to faba bean, but have you this also in your Phaseolus beans, the trädgårdsbönor?
Not yet. We have done some testings. We have sown brown beans inside of the fava bean fields that we know is really much bönsmyg. And actually they do not go inside of the brown beans.
Oh,
and
interesting.
We're trying 2 years now, and it's been nothing on the brown beans. So it's, yeah, we don't know why yet, but it's really interesting if it's smaller or if it's not, yeah, something they do not like with that bean.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more? I cannot see any hands here. Okay, then we have come to an end. So thank you all for very interesting talks and very good questions and answers. And I really have to say that all the speakers have been really, really good in keeping time. So thank you for that. And I think that there is a growing interest in plant proteins as an alternative to animal proteins, and that is driven by the consumer demands, and that is originating from health and environmental concerns. So today there is a rising interest in pulses, and I would say that pulses play a very important role in this transformation of the food industry, and they are affordable, healthy, tasty, and can be produced in a sustainable way. So today we have heard how research projects in different ways contribute to the knowledge about sustainable production and health effects of pulses, and also how creative entrepreneurs use pulses and develop them into tasty products. So I have learned a lot today, and I will continue and even increase my intake of pulses. So again, thank you all, goodbye, and take care.